Law of Tempest has one of the highest damage potentials of any law in the game right now, with several spells that can absolutely wipe units from the face of the earth if they manage to hit them with their full effects. However, this law has some risk for this high reward, with one of the most damaging spells being a randomly moving vortex, meaning it is as likely to wipe the enemies as it is to wander off into the sunset if the mood takes it. Fortunately, you have a couple more that are more certain to do damage to what you aim at, as well as a couple of seriously powerful buffs that can increase your damage output substantially without offering any thought to defense. If you're going for a full offense Kislev army, this is the law you want. And if you haven't guessed it already, Kislev is the only faction that can utilize this law. Just before we get into the spells though, this video has got a sponsor. This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Now by now you've probably heard all about VPNs and their importance for online privacy. They let you hide online activity from your ISP as well as from hackers and protect you whenever you browse on public or even personal home Wi-Fi. Because yes, you're not safe from those pesky hackers even when you're at home. This helps keep you safe and secure online and protects your privacy so you can browse in peace without to look over your shoulder every 2 seconds. It also allows you to connect to other countries and access geo-restricted streaming shows that might not be available in your area. And on top of this, Surfshark has a few things that make them stand out from the competition. First of all, they allow you to connect to an unlimited number of devices with one account all at once. This means you can be connected on your desktop, laptop, phone, and even your Android TV at the same time and enjoy safe, seamless surfing. They also have super fast servers in over 65 countries with included GPS spoofing, so your device shows the server's location rather than your own. What I'm trying to say is, if you're looking for a secure, fast and convenient VPN, then Surfshark has you covered. If you'd like to check them out and grab the best VPN for gaming, they're offering you 83% off plus 2 months free using the link in the description below. Huge thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring the video and supporting the channel. Now, onto the spells. First up we have Freezing Winds. This is of course the passive of the law and targets enemy units map-wide with minus 25% speed whenever the Tempest caster casts a spell. Of course it's a passive, so there's not really a bad way to use it since you use it every single time you cast another spell. So to make the most of it, you'll want to try to pin down enemy troops while they are slowed to reduce the efficacy of their charge. This will allow you to catch and shut down enemy cav that would otherwise outrun you. It can also allow your units to get away from enemies easier when on the run. Basically, it never hurts to be faster than the enemy, so whenever you're casting, do one of these things to make the most of it. Our first castable spell is Gust of True Flight. This is an augment spell, costs 4 winds of magic and has a 28-second cooldown. It targets allied missile units and has a 200 meter cast range and grants them 30% bonus to range and accuracy for 36 seconds. This of course wants to be used on missile troops when they are getting ready to fire at approaching enemies. The increased range will allow them to hit troops that would otherwise be out of their reach, and the accuracy will mean they won't miss as many shots, resulting in a much higher damage output. There's not too much point using it once the enemy close in on you, since the increased range will go to waste, and the accuracy should increase the closer the target is, so save your wins for something else once the lines clash. The Overcast costs 8 winds of magic and now affects enemies in a 35 meter area of effect. You'll want to use this the same as before, but now place it on as many units as possible to rain fire on approaching enemies. This will allow you to break their spirits before they ever reach your lines. Still, don't bother once the lines are closer, as the effects are simply not worth the costs. Next up we have Hailstorm, and this is a bombardment spell. It costs 6 winds of magic, has a 30-second cooldown, and can all be targeted on the ground. It has a 200 meter cast range, and it deals impact and explosion damage via bombardment on the medium strike area. You'll want to use this on clumps of enemy units to disrupt their formations and deal a ton of damage with those explosive projectiles. If it targets in the center of as many units as possible, you will maximize the damage dealt to multiple entities per projectile as the explosion can hit everything in their radius. This of course means it's most effective versus infantry, as larger single entities won't be struck quite as often, so focus on the front line's melee troops where possible and you can't go wrong. The Overcast costs 9 winds of magic and increases the duration and number of missiles fired. You want to save this for the clumps that have a little more HP and armor, as the extra missiles will mean extra damage, and you don't want to go wasting that on weak infantry that would otherwise die to the base spell. Your mid-game infantry with up to 50-ish armor would be the optimal targets for this, to ensure they take a nice chunk of damage without being wiped out before the spell is done casting. And one more thing for both the base and the Overcast, these missiles can and will hit your own troops if you don't target them carefully, so make sure they're in the clear before you cast. Swiftwing is an augment spell and costs 8 winds of magic and has a 44-second cooldown. It can all be targeted on allied units and has a 200 meter cast range. It grants the target plus 40% charge bonus and plus 25% speed for 26 seconds in a 35 meter area of effect. Pretty obvious that you want to use this one in your cav troops to give them a nice added oomph to their charge impact. Of course, since these are percentage based increases, the higher the target speed and charge bonus, the more of a buff they're going to get and the more impact this spell will have on your battles. to target the best cav units you can and send them in to do some cycle charging and obliterate the enemy HP and leadership in moments. Of course, since you can target an area of effect, you want to hit as many units as you can to drastically increase the damage output of your cav units. Have them hammer and anvil as much as possible while the effects last to make the most of it. The overcast costs 11 winds of magic and increases the area of effect to 55 meters. You want to use it pretty much the same as the base spell, only now you'll be able to hit even more units without the need to clump them up. Hit all those high charge bonus cav and watch their damage skyrocket. Next we have Biting Wind, and this is of course a wind spell. It costs 12 winds of magic, it's a 39-second cooldown, and can only be casted on the ground. It has a 150 meter cast range and deals moderate damage in an expanding forward moving area of effect over its 8-second duration. This is a great one for using on the enemy front lines if you've held formation and made them attack flat. The expanding wind will hit multiple units as it travels and deal some decent damage as well as disrupting enemy formations. The damage is not out of this world, so against armoured targets it's not going to be great, but it's of course magical damage, so versus demons that rely solely on physical resistance, it should do some tasty damage and wipe out a good number of entities per cast. Of course, since this is a wind spell, it does have a travel time, so also make sure that the enemy can't move out of the path before the spell hits them, or worse, kite your units into it. Yes, this is another that can hit your own troops, so target it carefully to avoid it. The overcast costs 17 winds of magic and doubles the armor piercing damage. This allows you to target the spell on more armoured troops up to around 60-ish and still be doing some decent damage. Of course, it's not going to be anything crazy like the Wind of Death that wipes them out, but it'll do a decent amount of damage and allow your other units to gain the advantage and finish the fight. Again, just be cautious of friendly fire, as overcasting increased damage onto your own dudes can feel very bad indeed. Next we have the Hawks of Miska. This is a vortex spell, costs 13 winds of magic, has a 49-second cooldown, can all be targeted on the ground and has a 150 meter cast range. It deals low, constant damage in a randomly moving 15 meter area of effect. It imbues Discourage on affected units, and it does not affect friendly troops, and lasts 20 seconds. Like all vortex spells, this one can be a little bit of a dice roll. It can randomly move directly into the enemy troops and deal some decent damage and give you the upper hand, or it can go straight for your own guys. Luckily, if it does the latter, they won't be affected, but you'll still have wasted quite a lot of wins. You can use this on clumps of enemy units and deal that constant damage to chip away at their HP over the course of the entire cast, whilst lowering their leadership with Discourage. This will give your melee troops a massive advantage as the enemy leadership will crumble from the debuff and the constant damage, as well as being stuck in melee that they'll likely start to lose. Of course, versus very high armor, this isn't going to be as effective, but in the mid game you should do some decent damage and take out a fair few troops per cast, as long as you get lucky with the movement. The overcast costs 17 winds of magic and adds 50% more damage. This makes it more viable in the later game, as the increased constant damage will start to chip away a fair bit of HP from even the most armoured of targets. Of course, the random movement can still screw you over, but if you find a large enough clump and fancy a dice roll, it's very worth a high cost for the potential damage it can do. And our final spell is Blizzard. This is another vortex spell, costs 18 winds of magic and has a 54-second cooldown. It can all be targeted on the ground and has a 200 meter cast range. It deals a low, constant armor-piercing damage in a large, stationary 20 meter area of effect. It imbues Frostbite on affected units and has a 15-second duration. This is another vortex, but this one is stationary, meaning the damage is going to stay right where you want it. The damage this spell can do is very impressive, since that constant armor-piercing damage means even armor targets are going to feel the burn, or I suppose the freeze. Combined with the Frostbite, it can be a very difficult spell to get away from. It can absolutely wipe out a ton of enemy lines and get your troops the front line's victory they need. What I'm getting at is, this spell can do some great damage. To give it the best chance, target the biggest clump you can, aim it at centre mass, and bring them up for the cleanup afterwards. The overcast costs a whopping 26 winds of magic and doubles the damage. Pretty much the same as the base spell, but now has the potential to do even more damage and slaughter most things it comes into contact with. Of course, it can still hit your own dudes, and this much damage will be devastating to whatever it comes in contact with, so be very, very careful. Make sure you cast it on the biggest enemy blob you can, and watch the fireworks. That concludes this guide on the lore of Tempest. Let me know what you think of the lore in the comments below, let me know what you thought of this video by leaving a like or a dislike, and if you want to see more content like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. I'd like to take this time to thank all supporters of the channel, Dominic Shamas and Adam T, and of course Henry Tucker for their support at the Unclean Ones tier. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so here on YouTube or over on Twitch and Patreon to get shoutouts at the end of videos just like all of these wonderful people. Huge thank you to all supporters, one final thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.